Hey yo guys, what's up and welcome back to Toe Tags and Metal Reviews, and today we're getting our first impressions of the new releases from Cryptopsy, Saliva, Dying Fetus, Puddle of Mudd, OOMPH, and Sylosis. Holy crap, this is probably one of the biggest first impressions video we've done ever on this channel.
Yeah.
6 albums that we're covering today.
A lot of music.
I mean, we're probably covering a couple that maybe don't need to be covered. Saliva and Puddle of Mudd, are they really metal? I would probably put them in like a new metal category. At least at some point in their life they were. But there's this surgence of new metal bands from the early 2000s that are coming out back this year. So
Yeah.
I thought it'd be fun to cover them and just kind of see what we thought about it. So I guess we'll kick off the video with those. I'm going to start with Saliva because out of the two, I listened to that one first. The album's called Revelation, okay, 41 minutes, 12 tracks. So going into this, I remember Saliva from, again, back in the early 2000s, and they had a couple songs that were like pretty good. I was like, this is good stuff, blah, blah, blah. Never really got into the band too much. But my goal with this album was to listen to it and hopefully get some sort of nostalgic throwback, like back to that old school new metal age from the early 2000s that I kind of grew up with. I didn't get that. So I was pretty disappointed. I think this has a more poppy, accessible type of new metal sound, right? If you want to put it that way. The vocals at certain times sounded auto-tuned, which was annoying me. Track number 7 was probably a standout track. It's called Warzone. I think it's just decent compared to the rest of the tracks. It's got too much angst to it though, like that kind of like, there's lines in it like, shut your mouth, and they call me psycho, you know, like, it's just like very angsty. I am the war zone, like, it's just, you know what I mean, it's like corny, cheesy. But overall the sound of the song was better than the rest of the stuff I heard. Track number 8 right after that's called How to Live. That also had a bit of a rap vibe to it, which also falls in line with that kind of early new metal stuff. But overall, I was left pretty underwhelmed, like kind of disappointed that I didn't get that nostalgia feel that I was hoping for. But it's Saliva. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that will like it for what it is. I feel like my taste is obviously, and most people, their tastes evolve over the years. I feel like I've just evolved out of this and just, I don't know how to appreciate what this is anymore. So maybe my opinion is not the greatest on it, but I didn't like it.
Yeah, I mean, the only Saliva stuff I knew is all the stuff they had done for WWE. So like Batista's theme, Ladies and Gentlemen, Hunt You Down, like that stuff. And I love all those songs. I'm like, yeah, this is sick. You know, I'm hype. I hope that this album gives me that. One thing to note is that the singer that was on, you know, performing on those songs left this band in 2012. So okay, maybe it won't sound exactly like what I remember, but it still doesn't mean it can't sound cool. And the first track, there was promise. Like, the bridge was cool with the screams. Musically, it has the edge that I wanted, and I liked that. Second track, it started to get a bit more melodic. I'm like, okay, well, second track, you know, to complement the rough aspect of the first track, okay. And then after that, it felt like this turned into a different album. I felt that this was turning to like that kind of poppy, almost even like perhaps a metalcore style of album. And I thought to myself, like, okay, is this like what happened here?
Almost like a genre shift.
Almost. And it kind of made me feel that in a sense this album is a weird term to say, dishonest. Because think about it. First track or two are there to like get you hooked in, and then after that it just changes to something else and stays that way. So it's like you give me this first track which is cool and that I like, and then everything else just isn't that. And I'm like, what happened? Why? So you put this one first just to get me listening, and now I'm invested, and then it just turns into not that, and I'm still listening, waiting for that to come back, which it never does.
Interesting.
I did like I Belong. Like, I kind of mentally was starting to tune out after Crows because I'm like, this is all just sounding like the same thing. But I liked I Belong, and I liked the groove of Horizon. But like overall, I was disappointed with it, and it's a shame that it didn't have like the edge and the power that I knew what this band is capable of with the stuff they did for WWE. So that's unfortunate, but it is what it is.
Puddle of Mudd, ubiquitous, right? 41 minutes, 11 tracks. Now this band, I do remember their big hit that they kind of debuted with. She Fucking Hates Me, right? That was a big hit back, I don't remember the year, 2000, 2001. I'm horrible with memory of years and stuff. But it was back around there sometime. But that's a fun song. It's a cool song. It makes you kind of want to sing along with it. It was a big hit in the alternative music world at the time. So I was already familiar with the sound of this band and the guy's voice, which I think is very acquired, and that's, I think, an important thing to point out. It's very whiny. It's very nasally, kind of bland in a way, but he sells it good. It's almost like a Wish Kurt Cobain or something like that. Like, I definitely feel like, and I'm probably right about this. If anybody disagrees, I think you're crazy. But I feel like, I wish I knew the singer's name, but I feel like there's a lot of Nirvana inspiration, Nirvana homage in this band, which makes sense. Nirvana's like king of grunge basically, and this is like grunge, new metal. It's hard to genreify things so much, man. It is. I kind of feel like it's got sleeves on both ends. It has some stuff that stood out to me though. I definitely enjoyed it more than the Saliva album. So the song number 4, Butterface, has this catchy twang to it, and also just the song. I'm assuming I didn't read the lyrics, but I'm assuming it's about like a woman that's attractive, Butterface, which is essentially what that term comes from. But I also think it's funny that term, at least I heard it back in the 90s, like it's an old term.
The way you said that reminds me of when we did I Worship Chaos and you said Widdershins.
Widdershins.
It's just the way you said that, it reminds
Butterface.
me.
So yeah, that was a fun song. Like I said, it's got this cool twang to it, which made it stand out. Cool stuff. Candy, which is actually the next track, is like an acoustic and piano, not really a ballad, but just a nice softer song. But the problem with it, again, is the vocals. Mm-hmm. If you can get past the whiny, nasally vocals and just kind of like get used to it, or if you like it, that's cool. Then you could probably appreciate songs like this, because they're actually pretty well-written tracks.
But I mean, if you enjoy the grunge sound, you'd probably have a taste for that style of vocal anyway.
You would. Because even like Kurt Cobain, like he's a whiny, kind of nasally kind of singer already. Although he's a little bit more on the harsh side than Puddle of Mudd guy. But yeah, it's still fun. Track number 8, You Wrecked Me. And this is where, I kind of stamp my opinion on them being very heavily influenced by Nirvana. You Wrecked Me has so many heart-shaped box vibes. Mm-hmm. Like, it almost feels like a ripoff, but not quite. And there's another song about another album that...
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
We'll get there.
It's a similar thing. So, this isn't as bad as the other example we're going to tell you, but I was getting so much heart-shaped box vibes from this. I'm like, yeah, they're definitely pulling from that vibe, which is okay. I don't mind it that much, as long as it doesn't sound like a complete ripoff. But you can tell where the inspiration is. Overall, the album was okay. I probably will never listen to it again if I'm going to be honest, but I didn't hate it. I thought it had some elements to it that actually made it enjoyable to get through, so it is what it is.
Mm-hmm. This was the last album I checked out of the day, so unfortunately I didn't get to finish it. I got about halfway through, but from what I heard, like, this is not a band I'm really, like, into, and She Hates Me is probably a song that I've heard and don't recognize. If I put it on, I'd probably be like, oh, okay, I've heard that. But I was never really that into this band beforehand. But hearing this, like, first thing I'm thinking, like, this is very grunge-esque, and I do like grunge. Like, I like that kind of stuff. So I was able to gel with that, but some songs started to get a little bit too twangy for my preference.
Like guitar twangy or vocal twangy?
Like vocally.
Okay.
It got a little bit too much, but the grungier, kind of harder hitting stuff I enjoyed. So overall, I kind of liked it, and it's interesting because we have seen plenty of bands that were big in the early 2000s releasing stuff, this year. This was probably one of the better ones that kind of really feels like it still has the vibe. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like they tried to modernize anything. They just did their thing, and that's what I want from bands.
Respectable.
It's respectable, but it's also kind of what you want. Like, I want this band to sound like this band.
There's a fine line, though. We've talked about this before. You want them to sound like they sound, but you also want some form of evolution or some degree of evolution.
Yeah, something new, but still that sound. Yeah. But don't try to, like, overly modernize yourself. But then that's always a risk that bands can take. Do we try something else? If it works, whoa, they tried this new thing and it's cool. If it doesn't work, they tried this new thing and it sucks. So it's a really hard gamble to take when you do that, especially when you have a developed and defined sound already.
Right. So next we're gonna go to the album I started my day out with, As Gomorrah Burns by Cryptopsy. Now, this is the one we were both looking forward to. We reacted to, I don't have it in my notes, was it Flayed Flesh or something like that?
Flayed the Swine was
Flayed
one
the
of them.
Swine.
The other one, I'm not quite sure I remember the name, but we did react to 2.
What? Oh, I forgot. Anyways, it's a great album.
In Ambience, that's what it was.
There you go. I thought this album was awesome. I mean, it's hard to listen to Cryptopsy and not be impressed just by the sheer technicality of the musicianship, and the vocals are always on point as well. So overall, the band is just super solid all the time. The challenge with stuff like that is finding stuff that really peaks out and gives you something to write about. This first song that stood out to me immediately was track number 3, Godless Deceiver. Just super overall awesome song. Again, it's hard to pick out why some of these songs stand out amongst others, but they just do. Some of them just have those grooves or those Bobby Boy moments. If you don't know Bobby Boy, you haven't been watching this channel long enough. But basically, it's stank face, okay? But you got great riffs. You got great solos followed by cool grooves / breakdown kind of sections. Just really well composed songs that really just gets you going. Track number 6, The Righteous Lost, has some really funky bass slaps.
Oh, there's bass in that song.
It's a bass
awesome,
in that song. Awesome. And then track number 7, Obescient? I can't spell. I can't pronounce the word. Obescient? Sure. So this one I felt like was a really cool track. It starts off kind of with a different vibe. It kind of creeps into it. It's kind of got this sinister kind of sound to it. I feel like this would have been a great intro track, building up the album right from the intro, like a cool intro to the album. It also works great as a pace breaker, right? My problem with it is that it's the second last song on the album, which ties into my bigger issue of the album. Again, this is a first impressions issue. The track listing placement, I think, is messed up, because the first 4 songs I found all had a very similar vibe, similar kind of sounding intros and stuff, and then the last 4 tracks all had pretty unique sounds and unique vibes, and they all kind of had their own identity. If you would just mix those up a little more instead of 4 and 4 and mix them stuff, I feel like the ride of beginning to end on this album, the whole ride, would have been a lot more fun. Just a lot more enjoyable, a lot more like dips and turns and weaves and stuff like that. Still enjoyed it though. So yeah, what did you think?
Well, I'm going to mention Godless Deceiver as well, because I like that it just starts with this just explosion with the scream, just bam, right in your face. Like, that was the first thing I thought, like, whoa, okay, here we go. And then they go right into like this 7/8 riff, which is cool, and then they use the foundation of that riff to also kind of convert it into a riff in 4/4. That was also pretty cool, and then like out of nowhere in the middle, we got this thrash groove going on, just like, okay, this is here, alright, awesome. And to mention about the first track though, there's a riff that it switches to in the first half. It sounds a lot like Get This by Slipknot. I don't know if you noticed that.
Didn't catch it.
But it's like, I hear that, I'm just thinking, get this or die, get this or die. That part of the song, chorus is rad as well. And one thing that's amazing about Flo Monier's performance on this album, I mean, he's a drumming legend. He was doing like this kind of stuff, which is, this kind of like drumming performance is like very modern. A lot of guys today are doing stuff that he does, but he was doing this stuff in the 90s.
Early 90s too.
Early 90s, so he's kind of like one of the pioneers of like this kind of modern drum technique.
Yeah.
But one thing I really love about the way he goes at it is that he plays with a lot of dynamic in his play.
Definitely.
So like he'll do the machine gun stuff, he'll hit that turbo button and go like a beast. But then he'll also do interesting grooves, he'll complement the riffs, he'll do a lot that complements the music.
Yeah.
Because when you're playing and you're just doing machine gun sounding stuff the entire time, it gets less special, it gets less interesting, and you hear it and you're not really wowed by anything.
It's boring.
So when you do it, you know, not too much, you do that in moderation, the times where you do hear it are more special. And you think, yeah, this is awesome, oh, he's doing the thing.
It's all about being tasteful.
Yeah, exactly.
All being tasteful.
A note that I made, which is kind of funny, I said at one point, this is kind of like Despised Icon meets Archspire, which is funny because those two bands and this band are all Canadian. But then I also thought there are some points that kind of just remind me of Cannibal Corpse.
Like, I mean, I can see all that. That's all accurate.
Yeah. So overall, though, I thought it was great. And this band hasn't dropped an album in 11 years. So, like, I think this is a great comeback album for this band. And like it's like we had, you know, there's a lot of mix albums that come out today, but there's like 3 heavy hitter death metal albums. Like we got the triple threat today.
Yeah.
And this one was just awesome. Like it's a great one.
Yeah. Strong return from Cryptopsy. Moving on to the next one. Make Them Beg for Death.
What a
Dying
sick
Fetus.
title. What a sick name for an album. And the album cover looks cool too.
So this one's clocking in 37 minutes, 10 tracks, and I think this album is solid from beginning to end. Just Dying Fetus doing what Dying Fetus does best, but that comes with a bit of a flaw. And the flaw is, for me, in my ears and the way I hear things, I feel like basically since Reign Supreme, this band has been using the same ideas over and over in all their songs. I feel like they hit kind of a pocket that they like, kind of a sound they liked in Reign Supreme, and that I think the fans received very well. And they kind of went, okay, that's the stuff people want, that's the stuff we're really good at. Let's just keep doing those ideas, but changing them a little bit. And now every song they do kind of just has the same kind of motifs and ideas in it. And that, for me, is starting to get annoying. The cool thing about it is I like all that stuff. They're really good at what they do. I mean, for a 3-piece too, and I'm always impressed every time I listen to Dying Fetus for a 3-piece band. These guys fill the sound so well. They just, they're great songwriters, but that might be part of the problem, is that there's only 3 brains making this music, right? And 3 brains can only have so many ideas. You can only be so creative. So, it just gets to the point where it's like, oh, I think I've heard this before on the last album, or I heard this, you know, they've done this lick before, or they've done this section before. Like, I was getting too much of that vibe, which is a little disappointing, but it still sounds really good. Track number 1, Enlightened Through Agony. Those little tiny, tight little pinch harmonics in that song, so nice, so nice. Love stuff like that. Track number 2, Compulsion for Cruelty. I'm gonna mention Bobby Boy again, because this song had me Bobby Boy, right? AKA Stankface.
Yeah, we reacted to that, actually.
Yeah.
And I remember enjoying it back then, and I enjoyed it now.
Exactly.
Same with Unbridled Fury. That's another good one.
And then here's an example. So Unbridled Fury, which is track number 5, has a really cool, nice, bouncy groove. And I was really into it. I was like, okay, this is cool, this is cool. This is a groovy band, but this is something that I didn't feel like I've heard before. But then it just changes to like the blast beat section. I'm like, okay, now it's back to like the Dying Fetus that they kind of do in their own thing, like they do all the time. Other than that, there's still rad grooves throughout the album. There's really cool riffs. I mean, the drummer's great. The vocalists, both vocalists are doing their thing. They sound great. It's Dying Fetus, man. It's like, it's good no matter what, as far as I'm concerned. I just wish that they stepped out of this pocket, this shell that they've created for themselves, and tried something different. Tried to make something that sounded a little bit more different than their past work. I feel like this just fits in too well with their other stuff, and they need to kind of come out of that shell. They need to expand a little bit, I think.
Well, you said riffs and you said grooves, and I have to agree. I feel like this album is very riff-centric, and it's not really built on special magical moments that stick out as much as they are just like, we're gonna have these sick riffs, they're super mean, they go hard, like this is what we're about. Now, I'm not as familiar with this band as you are. I know you were really into their last record, which came out some years ago, called The Wrong One to Fuck With. I may have listened to it once, but I didn't listen to it enough to really get super familiar with it. But there were constant notes of like, this riff is filthy, this is disgusting. Like the riff at about the 140 mark in Feast of Ashes, disgusting. Loved it. The riff in the second half of Throw Them in the Van is switching like back and forth between like a D beat and not, which I thought was kind of neat that they're going back and forth like this. And you mentioned pinch harmonics. Pinch harmonics in When the Trend Ends are also sick. Like they're just really tight pinch harmonics. You hear them, you're like, ooh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So like overall, really, really enjoyed this album, and it's like constant like, oh, that's nasty, that's disgusting. Like, oh, really, really hard hitting album, and that's another hitter for the triple threat of death metal today.
Yeah. Awesome album. So next on the list for today is going to be OOMPH. So this album is called Richter und Henker. It's 55 minutes, 12 tracks. And we've covered OOMPH on this channel before. We reacted to a song. I think it was a request by somebody.
Was it? I feel like we did. It's tough because I think it was years ago.
It was years ago. But anyways, I'm pretty sure that we've covered them before. I don't think we've done an album. But, so we knew what we were getting into, right? It was kind of like, you know, similar to Rammstein, but, you know, these guys came up before Rammstein, but similar kind of sound, similar kind of vibe. As a Rammstein fan, a longtime Rammstein fan, I think Rammstein's amazing. All I wanted from this was to sound more like Rammstein. But that might rustle some feathers and piss people off because they're like, oh, OOMPH came out first. Rammstein's copying OOMPH. But like, whatever, fuck off. The only track that really stood out to me was track number 4, which is Nur und Mensch. And it started off with this really cool riff, and I was like, oh yeah, here we go, here we go. And then it turns into kind of like an 80s synth pop song, or synth wave song. I'm not exactly sure how you categorize it. But then I started noticing more of that 80s synth wave, synth pop type of stuff on this album, which is cool, it's fine. But that's not really the vibe that I'm looking for, right? I also don't like the singer that much. I hate the fact I keep referencing Rammstein, but that's what my brain keeps telling me. I wish this was Till. If Till was singing this, I would love this a lot more. Till's voice would be suited better on this song. That's kind of what I kept thinking, which is unfair. It's unfair to have that thought because I grew up listening to Rammstein and I'm a big fan of Rammstein. So
if I recall correctly, though, I'm pretty sure they had a small lineup change for this album. I think it was the singer who left.
I don't know. I have no idea. You could be right. I never heard it. But yeah, there wasn't much grabbing me. I was hearing different references and different things. Like obviously I mentioned Rammstein. I was also hearing a lot of Marilyn Manson type of vibes. But that makes sense because Marilyn Manson got a lot of influence from 80s synthwave, synth pop kind of stuff. So if they both got influence from that, that makes sense that there would be some parallels there. But Richter and Henker didn't really do much for me. And this is another album I probably will never listen to again. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't. So, what did TV Fish think?
So, what I wanted from this album was actually the opposite of what you wanted. You wanted this to sound more like Rammstein. I wanted it to not. Because if I'm going to listen to a new Deutsch Hart, I hope I pronounced that right, album, I want it to sound like its own thing. I don't want this just to sound like Rammstein 2, or I guess Rammstein 0.5, because this band came first and influenced Rammstein.
Right.
And I think I got what I wanted, because I feel like they have this industrial sound, but they're a lot more melodic with it. And I like that, because then that makes it unique and original, and it doesn't make them sound like Rammstein. Yeah. You know, it makes them sound like their own thing, and I like that. That's what I wanted. I will say though, and we mentioned this earlier on in this video here, there is a song that sounds a lot like another song.
The rip-off song. What is it?
So it's the title track of this song, and it sounds like a copy-paste of Dead Memories by Slipknot. When I was first hearing it, it started with the drum groove. The drum groove is really similar, even down to like the accents on the ride bell. Mm-hmm. And then as it's going on, I'm hearing the same kind of changes, the same things. I started singing Dead Memories over this song. I'm like, this is just like a copy. Now, you can lift stuff. Like if you study jazz music, you'll find people lift everything. Guys will take the form of a song and write a new melody, and there it's a new song. Like people will do that. However, I feel like in this case, when songs have a lot more devoted character to them, when you start taking that character and really not changing it enough to feel like it's a new breath of fresh air outside of the jazz genre like that, it starts to feel like a copy. Like this feels like you took Dead Memories, you translated it to German, you took the solo out. That's pretty much it. And it doesn't feel like they did enough to, like, it's cool if this is a song that sounds like Dead Memories, but it's still its own thing. Rather, it honestly sounds like a copy, and that was bugging me, but you know what? They chose a good song to copy at least.
I guess.
Yeah, I like that song.
They did, but you shouldn't be copying anything that much.
It's a bit too close.
Yeah.
You know, it's a little bit too close. That being said, the bridge of the third track, titled Soll das Liebe sein, I like the bridge of that one. And Nur ein Mensch is also a pretty groovy track, and I liked the electronic and keyboard sounds that were coming out of it. Like I liked that vibe from this album, and it was a pretty consistent sounding album. It's not like anything crazily changed by the end. It was like the same deal, and I generally enjoyed it, and I'm glad that it has its own character. I'm glad that I can listen to this album and not just think of Rammstein the whole time, because I wasn't.
Yeah,
glad for that.
I just want to walk back one thing I said because I think it's important to distinguish. I don't necessarily want this to sound like Rammstein, but I want to be able to enjoy it as much as I enjoy Rammstein. That's kind of more accurate to what I was feeling. Because yeah, you never want to just have a band sound like another band. Right?
Just go listen to that other band.
Just go listen to that other band, right? So I was just hoping to enjoy it as much as Rammstein, and the parallels there are undeniable. So it's constantly reminded me. Anyways, the last album for this video that we're going to cover is probably the one that most people watching this video have been waiting for, A Sign of Things to Come by Sylosis. So, we reacted to Deadwood and...
Title track?
We reacted to the title track? Oh yeah, we did. And then there was another one. Track 3, I think?
Let me see the titles again.
I don't write all the songs.
It was not Perez. It was Poison for the Lost.
Poison for the Lost. Which track is that? Track 4. So it opens with Deadwood. Okay?
Deadwood.
Holy fuck. When we reacted to this song, we thought, holy fuck. We both added it to our playlist of our best tracks of 2023. Listening to it again, it's still holy fuck. This song is awesome. Okay?
I think awesome. It's an easy contender for Song of the Year. Like,
it's up there for sure.
It's really, really up there. And for reference, one thing we tend to do sometimes after we react to like a song from an upcoming album is we try not to listen to that song too much before the album comes out because we kind of spoil ourselves.
Don't want to overplay it.
But I did that for Deadwood. I listened to it a lot. Nothing happened. The magic was still there the whole time, even today listening to the actual album, because the song is that good.
So one thing I noticed on this song that I didn't notice when I first listened to it was the anvil shots. I don't know if you noticed the anvil shots.
Was it in, is it the bridge?
I don't remember where. I just have it in my notes. Anvil shots are rad. I remember hearing them. I don't remember what part of the song they're in, but there's anvil shots. At least that's what I call them. Somebody else might have a different term for them, but that's what I call them.
Because it sounds like someone hitting an anvil.
Exactly. So I'm just going to kind of break this down the way I have it. So there's 10 tracks on this album. The first 5 tracks are fucking awesome. You got great riffs, you got dynamics, you got diversity, you got epic solos, you got great range, and just all this really good stuff I could keep talking about for the first 5 tracks. And I'm like, yes, great, awesome. Then the next 5 tracks all kind of take a back seat, right? They're not bad songs. Let's just clear that right now. They're not bad songs. But compared to the first half of the album, the last half is like, ooh, I don't know what they were thinking. They're all a little bit more mellow, a little bit more slower. Again, this is on a first impression, okay? I find it interesting that you mentioned earlier that the Saliva album was dishonest because it starts off as something and then the last half of the album is something completely different. I kind of feel the same way with this. I feel like they teased like super solid first 5 songs and then the last half was not super solid. It's almost like B-side stuff. Now, those are opinions that can easily change by listening to it more.
Yeah.
Right? It's not uncommon at all for songs that are a little bit slower tempo or softer or more mellow to grow on you through the week. The songs that are heavier, faster, more aggressive, those are the ones that are going to impress you first and impress you faster. So I think that's what's happening to me here is I'm just like, ooh, wow, the first half is like, oh, really like bass punching, awesome, melting stuff. Second half, I think, needs to grow on me.
And it very well could.
It definitely could. The first half, though, man, just the composers, the structures, like I was just loving every bit of it. I was like, holy crap, these guys are making a phenomenal album. Like I was just so excited for where it was gonna go. And then it just started dipping for me, and that was a big disappointment. Right?
Especially if you're like at that high of a point.
I was at that high of a point.
To kind of come down, even if it's not even down that far. It feels far if it's that good.
It feels like a plummet. And our bar going into this, our bar for this album going into it was high because the singles they released were really good.
They were 3 for 3. The bar was like
through. The bar was high. Yeah. So I think super solid overall. But yeah, I wish the second half just didn't dip like that for me. Just
You know, I got a certain vibe from this album, and maybe you didn't even think of it this way, but to me, this album sounded like old school Trivium, but heavier.
I always think Sylosis sounds like Trivium. I think
that actually makes sense. I think you mentioned them in one of our reactions.
Yeah.
Either way, to me, this album is like, yeah, this is kind of like old school Trivium Ferocity, but like even heavier, deeper growls, darker, you know, more
better, well written too,
guttural, and you know, I already mentioned Deadwood, God tier song. Title track is a really good way to kind of bring the speed energy down, but still hit really hard, and I like that too. When Absent happens, and that's kind of like the mid-album break, because it's all quiet for like a good chunk, and then when the band hits, it's like, you mentioned Anvil Shot, now the anvil just dropped into your lap, like just an explosion when the band actually comes in during that song, and I loved that. I also did make note that the songs near the end were getting a bit more melodic, but it kind of made sense to me in terms of like the last two songs being that way, to kind of go out that way. And that's cool, and I think it will take more listens to understand, like, okay, is it really that well-paced? I did make a note that the album is well-paced, because I feel like the hooks are catchy, the melodic parts aren't, like, overtaking anything, because it's easy for things to start feeling that way, but I don't think that's an issue with this album, and then, like, the riffs and the aggression are just through the roof. Craziness. So I feel like this triple threat of death metal definitely delivered today. All three albums were great, and I enjoyed all of them.
I agree, and we weren't sure which one to review this week, so we did a poll on the channel, and hopefully you guys voted on the poll, and Sylosis was the winner. Yep. So we're going to review A Sign of Things to Come for the entire week, and we'll be back next week to give you guys our full and final review of the album after we listen to it as much as we possibly can. And I think it's going to be a fun week. I think there's going to be a lot to explore, a lot to discover on this album. And hopefully the riffs don't start getting stale over the week. I doubt it. I doubt it. But you never know.
Deadwood's on this album.
We run them through the ringer, man. We run them through the ringer. Anyways, guys, that's it for this video. It's been a long video, too.
Yeah.
So hopefully you guys stuck with us. And subscribe if you guys are new to the channel. Comment down below. That's what you thought of all these cool albums that we checked out today. And give us your thoughts. I'm Vile Self.
I'm TV Face.
I will see you guys in the next one. Keep those heads back.